All right, so we're cracking open Rich Dad, Poor Dad today. This one's practically a cornerstone in the personal finance world, right?
Definitely a classic.
And it's sparked its fair share of debate, which is always a good thing, right? It means people are thinking. We're going deep into Kiyosaki's ideas today, really trying to unpack what works, what might raise an eyebrow, and how it all applies today.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons this book is so polarizing is that Kiyosaki really goes after some of those deeply held beliefs about money. He wants us to completely rethink our relationship with it.
He doesn't pull any punches, that's for sure, especially right out of the gate with that whole two dads comparison. His own dad playing it safe versus his friend's dad, the entrepreneur. It's like he's laying out the battle lines right there.
Yeah, and it's super effective because it gets right to the heart of his core message. The rich don't work for money, they make their money work for them.
Okay, so that's the goal, right? But how do we actually make that happen? It feels like a huge leap, like going from zero to real estate mogul overnight or something.
Right, and that's where understanding the difference between assets and liabilities is so important. Because most people, they think about getting a good job so they can buy a house, a car, all the nice things. But Kiyosaki would argue that most of those things are actually liabilities.
Yeah, because they're taking money out of your pocket, right?
Yeah.
Assets are more about putting money in.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Every dollar you've got tied up in a liability is a dollar that could be invested in an asset, potentially generating passive income, building long-term wealth, that kind of thing.
It's like that old saying, you got to spend money to make money. But in this case, it's more about investing it wisely, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to Kiyosaki, investing isn't just about, picking stocks. It's about understanding how different asset classes work. Real estate, businesses, paper assets, all of that.
He's big on building multiple streams of income, which makes sense, especially in today's economy, right? But he's also a huge advocate for financial literacy. Now, that's a big umbrella term. What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, so for Kiyosaki, it's about way more than just like balancing your checkbook or even investing in your 401k. He's talking about really understanding how money works, the mechanics of investing, the tax implications of different financial decisions, even, how to structure a business in a way that benefits you.
Yeah, that whole unfair advantage thing when he gets into corporations and taxes, that tends to raise eyebrows, right? It feels like we're suddenly in murky territory.
It's definitely one of the more controversial parts of his philosophy. And it is important to note that he's gotten some criticism for, oversimplifying pretty complex tax laws. But his point, whether you agree with it or not, is that the tax code, it's structured differently for businesses versus individuals, right?
Okay.
And understanding those differences, even if you're not incorporating your own business tomorrow, it can help you make more informed choices with your finances.
So it's about leveling the playing field, at least in terms of knowledge.
Exactly.
And knowledge is power, as they say. But where do we even start? How do we actually go about acquiring that level of financial literacy?
It can feel overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. One of the things Kiyosaki stresses is continuous learning. So that could be, reading books, obviously, attending seminars, even finding mentors who are already successful in the areas that you want to learn about.
It's like he's saying, don't just play the game, learn how to win it,
Right.
Which brings us to his whole thing about minding your own business. I always found that a little vague. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it's definitely one of his more open-ended lessons. But I think what he's getting at is this idea of creating a life where you're not totally dependent on like a traditional job for income, right?
Okay, yeah.
So that could mean starting a business. It could be investing in real estate, could be building a side hustle, anything that gives you more control over your time and ultimately your earning potential.
So it all comes back to that entrepreneurial mindset he keeps hammering home. Not necessarily about like quitting your job tomorrow and,
right,
becoming a full-time entrepreneur, but always having that mindset of looking for opportunities.
Exactly. It's about, like you said, creating value, building something of your own. And this ties right back into the asset building mentality too, because when you're focused on minding your own business, you're naturally, I think, more inclined to acquire those assets that generate passive income, which then, of course, further fuels that financial independence, right?
It's like this positive feedback loop. But Kiyosaki is also, he's pretty upfront about the fact that this isn't always easy. He talks a lot about the obstacles we face, both the internal ones and, the external stuff too.
Yeah, for sure. And he doesn't sugarcoat it either. Like he calls out fear, cynicism, laziness, like straight up roadblocks, but he also offers strategies for overcoming them, which is key.
The one that always gets me is like his take on busy laziness. It's like we're all so caught up in, being busy, doing all the things, but are we actually being productive? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so true.
Are we moving the needle on the things that actually matter, or are we just like spinning our wheels,
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's so easy to convince ourselves that we're too busy to learn about investing, to start that side project, to even just like sit down and look at our spending habits. But a lot of times that busyness, it's like a form of procrastination almost, a way to avoid those things that make us uncomfortable.
Totally. And then there's just straight up fear. Like he talks about how fear is this natural human emotion, right? But what we do with that fear, that's what really defines us.
Totally. And he encourages us to almost reframe fear as like a signal, not a stop sign. It's a sign that you're stretching yourself, you're putting yourself out there. That discomfort can be a really powerful motivator if you learn to kind of channel it.
Instead of letting it paralyze you.
Exactly.
Which I think is what happens to a lot of people, especially when it comes to money and investing, right?
Totally. He also reminds us that knowledge is like the antidote to fear. The more you understand about money, about investing, the less intimidating it all becomes.
Okay, so we need to educate ourselves. We got to take action, push past that fear. But even when we do, there's still the risk of, messing up.
Oh, for sure. He acknowledges that setbacks are just like part of the game, but he also emphasizes that they're like an essential part of the learning process.
That's that whole failing forward idea, right?
Exactly.
You're going to make mistakes, but it's what you learn from them that matters.
Yep. Every mistake, every setback, it's an opportunity to learn, adjust your course, come back even stronger.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of assets, minding your own business, overcoming those internal obstacles. But let's get practical here. Like, what are some actual steps we can take based on what Kiyosaki lays out to actually start building that richer life?
Yeah, so he offers a ton of advice, but I think some of his most impactful tips, they really come down to mindset shifts and strategic actions, And one that might seem a little counterintuitive at first is this idea of paying yourself first.
Yeah, I used to think that meant like squirreling away whatever was left over at the end of the month.
Right.
But it's not that at all.
No. Kiyosaki's approach is more about making your financial well-being like a non-negotiable priority. So before you pay your bills, before you buy groceries, before anything else, you're allocating a portion of your income toward your savings and investments.
It's such a simple shift, but it's so powerful. Like, it's sending a message to your brain that my financial future matters. This isn't just hoping for the best. This is me actively creating it.
That's exactly what it is. It's about shifting from that scarcity mindset, I'll save what's left, to an abundance mindset of, okay, I'm investing in my future first and then figuring out the rest.
I love that. And that ties into his advice about treating your savings and investments as an essential expense. Like it's a bill you have to pay.
Exactly. He wants us to view building wealth not as this like luxury, but as a necessity. It's a fundamental part of taking control of your life.
It's like reverse budgeting.
Yeah.
And speaking of shifting mindsets, Kiyosaki also stresses the importance of choosing your friends carefully, right? Like who you surround yourself with.
Yeah. And he's famously blunt about that.
Yeah.
He basically says, surround yourself with people who are already financially successful.
Yeah.
And while his delivery might rub some people the wrong way, I think the underlying message there is really just about being mindful of the company you keep.
It's about aligning yourself with people who inspire you, who challenge you to grow and who share your values, especially when it comes to like money and ambition and all of that.
Right. And to be fair to Kiyosaki, I don't think he's saying like ditch your friends if they're not,
right,
rolling in dough. It's more about actively seeking out mentors and, building relationships with folks who are maybe a few steps ahead of you on whatever path it is you're trying to take.
Finding those people who have like been there, done that, and can actually like offer guidance from experience.
Exactly. Tap into their wisdom, learn from their mistakes, maybe even leverage their networks a bit to accelerate your own journey.
He also has that intriguing, I guess, advice about being an Indian giver.
Right. And again, got to acknowledge that this analogy has drawn a lot of criticism for being, culturally insensitive, putting it mildly. But what he's trying to get at, I think, is this idea of like maximizing your returns and reinvesting that capital quickly.
So less about like literally taking back gifts.
Right.
And more about being a really savvy investor, somebody who understands how to spot those opportunities for like rapid ROI.
Exactly. It's about, aiming to recoup your initial investment as fast as possible and then immediately putting that money back to work. So you're, compounding those returns over time.
Okay, so we're getting into more advanced strategies here.
Yeah, definitely a more, intermediate to advanced concept, and probably something where, having a good understanding of risk management and all of that is pretty crucial.
For sure, for sure. Which actually, speaking of which, he talks about the importance of like building a team of professionals who can guide you.
Yes.
So financial advisors, accountants, lawyers, people who really know their stuff.
He's a huge proponent of that. And it's interesting because, even when it comes to actually hiring those professionals, he has a really interesting perspective, which is that he actually advises paying your brokers well.
Really? See, I would think, like, why would I want to do that? I could just find the cheapest option, right?
Right. You'd think so. But his argument is that, good advice, it's priceless. When you're dealing with something as important as your financial future, it's worth investing in the best guidance you can possibly afford.
So finding that balance between being like cost conscious, but also recognizing that like experience and expertise are valuable.
Exactly. And a good financial advisor can, potentially save you or make you way more than their fees over the long run.
That's a great point. Now, there's another piece of advice that I found super interesting, which is his thing about master a formula, then learn a new one.
Yes.
What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah. So I think it goes back to being a lifelong learner. Always be expanding that skill set, that knowledge base. Because Kiyosaki really believes that the more you understand about, different investing strategies, different business models, the financial instruments and all of that, the more you know, the better equipped you are to navigate those changing market conditions.
So it's diversification, but not just with your investments, right? It's like diversifying your knowledge.
Exactly. It's about becoming this like well-rounded investor, entrepreneur, constantly seeking out new challenges, always trying to expand that understanding of how money works.
I love it. And at the end of the day, he reminds us that true wealth, it's not just about money, right?
Right.
It's about using your resources, your time, your energy, your finances to create the life that you actually want.
Yeah, he talks about using assets to buy luxuries. But I think the bigger message there is about making sure your spending is aligned with your values, right? Like instead of just working yourself to the bone to accumulate possessions, design a life where your money is working for you. Fund those experiences, those adventures that actually light you up.
Yes. It's about having that freedom to pursue your passions, spend time with loved ones, maybe even, make a positive impact on the world.
Exactly. It's about shifting from that mindset of scarcity to that abundance mindset, recognizing that true wealth, it's about way more than just your net worth.
Well said. And there you have it, our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Hopefully you found this one as eye-opening as we did. We really tried to cover those core lessons, unpack some of those more challenging concepts, and, hopefully leave you with some actual things you can do.
Yeah. It's been great diving into this with you. Absolutely. And hey, even if you don't agree with every single thing Kiyosaki says, you got to admit, this book, it sparks some important conversations. It makes you really examine your own relationship with money, your own beliefs about it.
Absolutely. It's a classic for a reason. It makes you think.
Exactly. So whether this got you thinking about, I don't know, maybe tweaking your investment strategy a little, or finally having that conversation with a financial advisor, the important thing is that you keep learning, you keep growing, and you keep striving for that richer life, whatever that looks like for you.
Beautifully said. And until next time, keep those financial goals in sight. But remember, it's not just about getting rich. It's about living that truly wealthy life.